of U.S. lawmakers met the Dalai Lama at his monastery in India on Wednesday. The delegation said they would not allow China to influence the choice of the exiled Tibetan spiritual leader's successor, a comment that will likely anger Beijing. The remarks come as Washington and Beijing seek to steady rocky ties, while India pushes China to secure lasting peace on their disputed Himalayan frontier, 4 years after a bloody border clash. Here's Republican Representative Michael McCaul.
For the Dalai Lama knows that this is not true, that Tibet is part of China. And the people of Tibet know that that is not true. And the United States of America knows that that is not true. But it is still my hope that one day the Dalai Lama and his people will return to their home in Tibet in peace.
The 88-year-old Dalai Lama fled to India in 1959 after a failed uprising against Chinese rule in Tibet. The question of his successor has been a thorny issue. Tibetan tradition holds that the Dalai Lama is reincarnated after his death, and the current leader has said his successor may be found in India. Beijing has said the tradition must continue, but its officially atheist communist leaders have the right to approve the successor as a legacy inherited from China's emperors. Analysts said it highlights the power and influence of the role, fueling Beijing's tussle to control it. The U.S. lawmaker said President Joe Biden would soon sign a bill aiming to press China to resolve the Tibet dispute. The bill seeks to push China to hold talks with Tibetan leaders and secure a negotiated agreement on Tibet. Although Washington recognizes Tibet as a part of China, the bill appears to question that position.
So this Resolve Act...
Penpa Tsering, the political leader of the exiled Tibetan government, said the congressional approval of the bill was a significant breakthrough and believed it would put pressure on Beijing to negotiate.
Nearly 2 million Muslims will complete the Hajj pilgrimage this week, but extreme heat has been fatal for hundreds who started the journey last Friday to the Kaaba in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. According to reports, at least 562 people have died during the Hajj. Egypt has reported 307 deaths and 118 missing, with temperatures hitting over 124 degrees Fahrenheit. The Hajj timing is based on the lunar year, moving back 10 days each year. While the Hajj is now moving towards winter, it will occur in the peak of the summer in Saudi Arabia by the 2040s. Climate scientist Fahad Saeed says these deaths hint at future risk for millions of Hajj pilgrims.
We need to prepare, we need to adapt, we need to introduce the adaptation option as much as we can, while realizing that it will compromise on the centuries-old ritual, but still we need to save people. But at the same time, we must do climate action to stop the global warming at 1.5 degrees centigrade. At anything beyond that, we are putting those pilgrims at the risk of death.
Heat-related deaths during the Hajj have been recorded since the 1400s. Pilgrims' vulnerability stems from exertion, exposure, and older age, as well as a simple lack of acclimatization to the heat. According to Saudi officials last year, more than 2,000 people suffered from heat stress during that Hajj. A 2021 study in the journal Environmental Research Letters found that if global temperatures rise by 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, heat stroke risk for Hajj pilgrims will increase by 5 times. Still, pilgrims remain determined. For some, it's a once-in-a-lifetime affair.
Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam, and it is a mandatory duty for every capable person, so you have to exert efforts and get tired. Hajj is a difficult task, so you have to exert efforts and perform the rituals even in the conditions of heat and crowding. You use an umbrella, drink water, and pour it onto your body to prevent dehydration, and the water sprinklers in the walkways help.
In 2016, Saudi Arabia implemented a heat strategy with shaded areas, water points at every 500 meters, and improved healthcare. Saudi health authorities advise pilgrims to stay hydrated and avoid outdoor activities from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. during this year's Hajj.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed a mutual defense pact on Wednesday, promising to help each other if attacked. Putin has courted Kim with gifts of limousines and a tour of Russia's new space launch center, as well as deepening military cooperation, which has alarmed the United States and its Asian allies. Kim spoke at a rare press conference, announcing the signing of a comprehensive strategic partnership.
Our two countries' relations have been elevated to the new higher level of an alliance, laying the legal groundwork for the grand ideas of leadership of the two countries and longing of our people to build a strong country while firmly protecting the peace and security in the region and the world in line with the common interest of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Russian Federation.
At the start of their summit, Kim expressed unconditional support for all of Russia's policies, including a full support and firm alliance for Putin's war with Ukraine. Russian media reported Putin said Moscow was fighting the hegemonic, imperialist policy of the United States and its allies.
We highly appreciate your consistent and unwavering support for Russian policy, including the Ukrainian strand. I'm referring to our fight against the hegemonic policy imposed for decades, the imperialist policy of the United States and its satellites against the Russian Federation.
This was Putin's first visit to North Korea in 24 years. He received a lavish welcome in Pyongyang. The visit will likely reshape decades of Russia-North Korea relations at a time when both face international isolation. Seoul and Washington are watching closely and have expressed concern about the two countries' growing military ties. The reaction from China, the North's main political and economic benefactor, and an increasingly important ally for Moscow, has been muted. Russia has used its warming ties with North Korea to needle Washington, while heavily sanctioned North Korea has won political backing and promises of economic support and trade from Moscow. Park Wong-gon is a professor of North Korean studies at Ewha Women's University.
The
The biggest point of this North Korea-Russia summit is that it has a symbolic meaning. From Kim Jong-un's point of view, Putin's visit to North Korea was necessary to improve his diplomatic isolation and image as a rogue state in the international community. I think that's why he planned this summit as a big political event, since it is also a good opportunity to show his achievements to the North Korean people, which is differentiated from his predecessors.
The United States and its allies say they fear Russia could provide aid for North Korea's missile and nuclear programs, which are banned by UN Security Council resolutions. They have also accused Pyongyang of providing ballistic missiles and artillery shells that Russia has used in its war in Ukraine.
Israeli forces may have repeatedly violated the laws of war and failed to distinguish between civilians and fighters in the Gaza conflict, according to the UN Human Rights Office on Wednesday. Separately, the head of a UN inquiry accused the Israeli military of carrying out the extermination of Palestinians. The UN Rights Office, or OHCHR, issued a report examining 6 Israeli attacks that caused many casualties and destroyed civilian infrastructure. This was its spokesperson, Jeremy Lawrence.
It notes that unlawful targeting, when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population, in line with the state or organisational policy, may also implicate the commission of crimes against humanity.
Israel's permanent mission to the United Nations in Geneva characterised the analysis as factually, legally and methodologically flawed. It said the OHCHR had, at best, a partial factual picture. Lawrence said the attacks examined occurred before December, but were part of a continued pattern, though it was getting harder to assess the situation on the ground as the war went on. In a separate meeting of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, the head of the UN Commission of Inquiry, Navi Pillay, said perpetrators of abuses in the conflict must be brought to account. She repeated findings from a report published last week that both Hamas militants and Israel have committed war crimes. But she said Israel alone was responsible for the most serious abuses under international law, known as crimes against humanity.
We conclude that Israeli authorities are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and violations of international humanitarian and human rights law, including extermination, intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, murder or willful killing, using starvation as a method of war, forcible transfer, gender persecution targeting Palestinian men and boys, sexual and gender-based violence amounting to torture, and cruel or inhuman treatment.
Israel, which does not cooperate with the inquiry and alleges an anti-Israel bias, chose the mother of a hostage held by Hamas to speak on its behalf at the meeting.
The international community must not allow political consideration to override our core human values.
And it criticised the report on the grounds that it did not give due attention to the hostages taken by Hamas in its attack on southern Israel on October 7th.
Families of the 346 people killed in 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes are demanding that the jetmaker face a fine of close to $25 billion. They put the request to the US Justice Department on Wednesday. A lawyer for the families said the amount was justified, saying Boeing was guilty of the deadliest corporate crime in US history. Earlier in the week, the families had gathered at Congress as company chief Dave Calhoun was grilled over the incidents. They weren't mollified by his show of contrition.
I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses.
Calhoun said Boeing took responsibility for the crashes, which were traced to a design flaw. But the families say the aerospace giant neglected known safety issues and must face prosecution.
Strengthening the safety of the flying public is important, but there needs to be criminal charges for the people at the top, the people in the driver's seat who were responsible for 346 deaths, including that of my sister in every single face that you see here.
After the crashes in 2018 and 2019, Boeing agreed to a deferred prosecution deal with the DOJ, shielding it from criminal charges if it promised to improve its compliance program. However, the department last month concluded that the firm had not honoured all terms of the deal, something Boeing denies. Prosecutors now have until early July to decide whether to press ahead with a criminal case. They could also negotiate a plea deal with Boeing or extend the deferred prosecution agreement.
Folks, I'm not interested in playing politics with the border or immigration. I'm interested in fixing it.
President Joe Biden announced one of the biggest efforts in recent history to legalize undocumented immigrants on Tuesday, offering a path to citizenship to hundreds of thousands of immigrants in the U.S. illegally who are married to U.S. citizens. It's an election year move that contrasts sharply with Biden's Republican rival Donald Trump's plan for mass deportations.
The steps I'm taking today are overwhelmingly supported by the American people, no matter what the other team says. In fact, polls show over 70% of Americans support this effort to keep families together. And the reason is simple. It embraces the American principle that we should keep families together.
According to the White House and Department of Homeland Security, the program will open to an estimated 500,000 spouses who have lived in the U.S. for at least 10 years. Also eligible will be some 50,000 children under the age of 21 with a U.S. citizen parent. Those who are considered public security threats or who have disqualifying criminal history would not be eligible.
I refuse to believe that to secure our border we have to walk away from being in America.
Biden, a Democrat seeking a second term in November's presidential election, took office vowing to reverse Trump's restrictive immigration policies. But faced with record levels of migrant arrests at the U.S.-Mexico border, Biden has toughened his approach in recent months, barring most migrants crossing the border from requesting asylum. Biden's planned legalization program for spouses of U.S. citizens could reinforce his campaign message that supports a more humane immigration system. The program will allow the spouses and children to apply for permanent residence without leaving the U.S., removing a potentially lengthy process in family separation. Senior Biden administration officials said that the implementation will roll out in the coming months.
Polish authorities have fined a hospital for denying an abortion to a woman whose pregnancy may have endangered her life. It marks a shift in the country with some of the strictest termination rules in Europe. The country's previous nationalist government introduced a near-total ban on abortion in 2021. They were only allowed in cases of rape, incest, or threat to the woman's health or life, but even then, doctors could still refuse to perform them on moral grounds. The issue has sparked massive protests in recent years. In 2023, women's rights were front and center in the election campaign that ushered in a pro-European coalition government. It recently introduced a regulation to penalize publicly funded medical centers that refuse legal procedures. At the Foundation for Women and Family Planning in Warsaw, Antonina Lewandowska explains what happened in this case to the 41-year-old woman who was 14 weeks pregnant.
The woman presented a certificate from a psychiatrist, which clearly stated that continuing this pregnancy was a threat to health or life, and this is a sufficient legal basis to terminate the pregnancy.
The hospital requested more documentation and ultimately refused to perform the abortion. The woman ended up getting it at a different hospital. That was unlawful, according to Poland's National Health Fund, which fined the hospital nearly $137,000.
The aggrieved person contacted us as a foundation and informed us about the situation. We think this is the first of many wins. We currently have a dozen or so cases that are pending before the patient ombudsman or have already been won. It is the beginning or signal of some upcoming change.
The medical center plans to appeal the decision. The country's health minister has warned there could be additional penalties coming at other facilities.
Selling his produce along a street in Jinan in eastern China, 56-year-old farmer Li Weidong says the city is as hot as a stove. The capital of Shandong province has been struggling with scorching heat for over a month. On Wednesday, authorities in the province declared an orange heat alert. A nearby reservoir, though not completely dried up, is showing signs of distress. Li says the water used to be much closer to the road.
When it was not dried up, the water was just a couple of meters away from the road. Now it's shrunk, now it's dried up. The irrigation for farmland and drinking water supply for the city both depend on it.
This 70-year-old farmer in Jinan says she planted apples, peaches, and other crops during this summer's planting season. She estimates 90% of those crops are now damaged. Even with the drought in the 1960s, it wasn't as dry as it is this year, she says. Back then, it still rained once or twice in the spring, but this year, it hasn't rained even once. In some parts of the wheat-growing provinces of Hebei, Henan, and Shandong, temperatures could reach upwards of 111 degrees Fahrenheit, potentially breaking historical records for the month of June. Chinese state media CCTV said
that authoritarian powers are aligning more and more, and they are supporting each other in a way we haven't seen before. We see that also, of course, in the war in Ukraine. North Korea has provided an enormous amount of ammunition. So, of course, in return, Russia is giving something to North Korea. And we are very deeply concerned about the possibility of also Russia now providing support for their nuclear and missile programs. So again, the answer is that when they are more and more aligned, authoritarian regimes like North Korea, China, Iran, Russia, then it's even more important that we are aligned as countries believing in freedom and democracy. So NATO is in that way even more important now than before.
So what is the impact on NATO?
Our Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, thou art...
It is now my honor to invite the Chief Justice
and devote myself to the well-being of the Republic and all its people. So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Your Majesty, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect has been duly sworn in. The President of the Republic of South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa. The following...
It's super good. Thank you.
Ese es mi niño, mi niña. Sí. Es un sistema muy contradictorio que eso, de un punto de vista psicológicamente, al principio me afectó porque no podía tener un diálogo con nadie. El idioma, al principio, yo decía, ¿qué hago? ¿Cómo me comunico? Y entonces ya actualmente me he aclimatizado muy bien al Estado, de verdad que sí, me he aclimatizado. He tenido mucha paciencia en la espera de todo el proceso, pero la tranquilidad vale mucho para mí.
About 30% of our workforce in Lincoln is made up of immigrant labor. So that's about 900 people. Immigrants are hardworking, they come from a very difficult background. They just want to better their family lives. So they work hard, they're reliable, they're smart, they're tenacious, they get things done. So our people respect that, our regular local people respect that, and everyone really gets along very well.
Today I'm announcing a common sense fix to streamline the process for obtaining legal status for immigrants married to American citizens who lived here for a long time. For those wives or husbands and their children who have lived in America for a decade or more but are undocumented, this action will allow them to file the paperwork for legal status in the United States, allow them to work while they remain with their families in the United States.
We
have offered ourselves to host injured people from Palestine, but also children from Palestine to come to Europe and stay here until the war is over. A few days ago, I talked to the Palestinian Prime Minister, and we have a very extensive and constructive talk about how to be of meaningful assistance, especially for the humanitarian aid, but also for the day after, for the reconstruction in Gaza. Also, yesterday, I talked to the Israeli foreign minister in order to see how Greece could promote the peace formula. There is a total lack of basic resources, of fundamental networks, which are absolutely essential in order for people to be able to live under humane conditions. So we need to start working on first, providing housing for people. Secondly, providing essential networks, including electricity and watering and food. And then to be able to provide some adequate security.
There was some good news for British shoppers Wednesday. Inflation sank back to its 2% target in May for the first time in nearly 3 years. That will be welcome news too for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, with his ruling Conservative Party far behind in the polls just weeks before a general election. Sunak claimed the decline was proof his policies were working and urged voters not to put that at risk by voting Labour. The figure will also be closely watched at the Bank of England, with policymakers there meeting Thursday to decide their next move. But services price inflation, which the BOE watches very closely, fell less than expected to 5.7%. Economists say such data shows underlying price pressures remain strong, undermining the case for rate reductions. Even so, UK inflation has come down faster than in the US or Eurozone, belying fears that it could prove stubbornly persistent. Price rises had first picked up in 2021 due to bottlenecks caused by the COVID pandemic. They then soared the following year as Russia's invasion of Ukraine drove a surge in energy prices.
The US is pushing Japan and the Netherlands to help it crack down on China's ability to make cutting-edge chips. That's according to a Reuters source. US Export Policy Chief Alan Estevez is reportedly headed for Japan, where he'll press policymakers to tighten export controls. The country is home to key chip equipment makers such as Nikon and Tokyo Electron. Japan's government has already curbed shipments of 23 types of equipment, including machines that can etch microscopic circuits. It's believed Estevez also met with the Dutch government to seek its help. The Netherlands is the base for ASML, the world's largest maker of chip equipment. It's already the subject of export controls. Now, Washington wants the firm to stop servicing some of its gear in China, but has reportedly been rebuffed by the Dutch government, which says it doesn't have the legal power to enforce such a move. The US first imposed sweeping restrictions on some chips and related equipment in 2022. It wants to slow China's efforts to modernize its military. A year later, it reached agreement with Japan and the Netherlands on cooperation over those restrictions.
Last week to slap tariffs on imports of Chinese electric vehicles, Beijing has fired back with an anti-dumping investigation into imports of European pork. And that is exactly the scenario Brussels was hoping to avoid. At first glance, it might seem weird that the world's biggest consumer of pork is so quick to jeopardize its most important foreign supplier. Last year, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and France accounted for almost half of China's total $6 billion of pork imports. Beijing is so paranoid about the cost of the meat that it keeps vast frozen reserves of it on hand to release if prices start to spike. But China is currently dealing with a massive oversupply, part of a nasty boom-bust cycle that the country's pig farmers are trapped in. That means imported pork is hardly a must-have right now. However, those same imports are a big deal to the EU, which last year shipped 14.6 billion euros worth of agricultural goods to China. Earlier this year, Brussels sent a commissioner to China to ask Beijing to leave agricultural goods out of any upcoming trade scuffles. But all that did was tell China where and how it could cause the most pain. And on top of threatening tariffs on pork, Chinese state media have also hinted that dairy tariffs could be on the cards. The lesson here for the
Apple has suspended work on its next high-end Vision headset. That was the report from The Information on Tuesday. It cited an employee at a manufacturer making key components for the mixed reality Vision Pro. The report said Apple is still working on releasing a more affordable Vision product before the end of next year, although it will have fewer features. It added Apple had originally planned to divide its Vision product into 2 models.
I see 2 dinosaurs!
The company plans to launch its Vision Pro in 8 new countries, including China and Japan, to push sales of the $3,500 device. But the headset has recently struggled with slower demand after initial customer enthusiasm. The Information reported Apple had lowered priority for the successor to the Vision Pro for the past year. It's assigned fewer employees to work on the next model over time and focused on reducing the costs of the first generation's components. Apple did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment. Chinese automakers want authorities to retaliate against new EU tariffs, according to a report. China's state-backed Global Times newspaper said Wednesday auto firms had urged Beijing to hike tariffs on imported European gasoline-powered cars. The European Commission announced last week it would impose anti-subsidy duties on up to 38.1% on imported Chinese EVs from July. That followed a move by the US to hike tariffs on Chinese cars in May. The report said China's auto industry called on the government to adopt firm countermeasures at a closed-door meeting on Tuesday. Sources said the meeting was organised by China's Ministry of Commerce in Beijing and attended by SAIC and BYD. European giants were also reportedly present, including BMW, Volkswagen and more. The report said the main aim of Tuesday's meeting was to put pressure on Europe about the tariffs. The Commerce Ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The European car makers either declined to comment or did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Industry insiders said both Europe and China have reasons for wanting to strike a deal in the months ahead. They want to de-escalate tensions and avoid the addition of billions of dollars in new costs for Chinese EV makers. The European Commission said Wednesday it was looking at the situation with a view to discussing if a mutually agreeable solution can be found.
Clarkson's drastic weight loss has raised concerns among her friends. Despite her insistence on doing it for health reasons, Kelly Clarkson, famous for her powerful voice and successful music career, has recently lost over 60 pounds using a weight loss drug, sparking worry among her close friends. Her inner circle claims that Clarkson has become moody and shaky, showing signs of extreme dieting and the side effects of the drug. Despite these concerns, Clarkson is determined to continue her weight loss journey to improve her health and get back into the dating scene following her divorce from Brandon Blackstock. Initially, Clarkson's friends were supportive, happy to see her shedding the weight she had struggled with for years. However, they have become increasingly worried as they observe her skipping meals, lacking energy, and appearing gaunt with sunken cheeks. Reports suggest Clarkson has suffered from wardrobe malfunctions and forgotten lyrics on stage, adding to the distress of her friends who miss the vibrant and healthy Kelly they once knew. Clarkson's weight loss journey began after seeing a recording of herself performing and realizing the extent of her weight gain. This, combined with her doctor's warnings about prediabetes and other health issues, prompted her to take action, despite her initial fears about using weight loss drugs due to her thyroid problems. She insists the drug she used is not Ozempic, but something similar that helps break down sugar in the body. Her weight has been a subject of public discussion since she rose to fame on American Idol. Clarkson, who was thin during her time on the show, still faced criticism for her body compared to other contestants. Over the years, she has experienced fluctuations in her weight, facing pressure from the media and the public to maintain an acceptable figure. Despite these pressures, Clarkson asserts that her recent weight loss is solely for health reasons, not due to external expectations. Clarkson has also made significant lifestyle changes, incorporating a protein-rich diet, increased physical activity, and practices like cold plunges and infrared saunas. Her friends continue to support her but remain concerned about her extreme dieting and the side effects of the weight loss drug.
A-list Hollywood celebrities like Johnny Depp are accustomed to earning 7 to 10-figure sums from their various ventures, including acting and endorsements. As their income grows, so does their penchant for extravagant spending, with purchases ranging from private islands to rare artifacts like dinosaur bones and even entire towns. Despite the absurdity, the allure of endless wealth often knows no bounds. Amidst Depp's legal turmoil, his financial affairs were publicly scrutinized, revealing a startling list of lavish acquisitions and a monthly expenditure totaling $2 million. This period shed light on the extravagant lifestyle that can accompany immense fame and fortune. During his peak earning years, Depp's monthly expenditure of $2 million seemed inconsequential. Amidst a lawsuit with the management group, Depp accused them of financial mismanagement, but TMG countered, blaming Depp. Details emerged revealing extravagant spending habits including $30,000 on wine, $300,000 for a large staff, and $150,000 for security, and $200,000 for private jet travel. TMG also alleged that Depp spent $75 million on 14 properties, including an entire village in France. Depp tried to sell the village for $63 million alongside other extravagant purchases like islands, penthouses, and a $3 million expenditure to launch Hunter S. Thompson's ashes from a cannon. Fans reacted strongly to these revelations. While some understood his wine expenses given his location in France, others found his overall spending excessive, considering his reported $20 million per movie income. At the height of his Pirates of the Caribbean fame, Depp was earning staggering amounts, with some years topping $100 million. Between 2003 and 2016, he reportedly earned $650 million. Notable paychecks include $55 million for Alice in Wonderland and $60 million for Dead Man's Chest. Despite his lavish spending, Depp's net worth remains around $150 million, largely from real estate holdings. With his recent career setbacks, including being dropped from the Fantastic Beasts franchise, sustaining his extravagant lifestyle may become challenging unless his fortunes change.
أول حاجة إحنا بنشتري الحطب، بنشتريه بصعوبة، بنكسره بصعوبة، يعني الله بيعلم كيف بنجيبه وبنمشي مسافات طويلة عشان نجيبه. المي للشاي والقهوة هذه بصف عليها دور علشان أجيب المي يعني عشان نعمل هذا الإشي، يعني بصعوبة برضو. بنولع النار بصعوبة. هي رسالتي إني أنا أرجع أشوف أبويا، ألتقي فيه وأشوف أخويا يطلع وأشوفه، أرجع لحياتي الطبيعية، أرجع لدراستي، لتوجيهي، أرجع لغرفتي، أرجع لحياتي الطبيعية، إنه كل شيء يرجع طبيعي بدل ما إحنا هنا بالخيمة وضعنا صعب.
يلا
إترا حدنا تشيلني حدنا تمر تودوا أقوى كين كوريت براتيجي أرجوك كتوالم براتيجي بعد إترا حدنا راشيل ده ساجن مريوي بعد دروا بعد ياتي হিবে বাতে আছে বাদে বিয়ে সাত দে মেরে উতরে মার টেঙ্গিনের ধরে 10,000
আর তো এটা জোর দিলে আমার তোর হ্যান্ডেলের সমস্যা পানিলের সমস্যা হ্যান্ডেল বাজা যাবে তারা তোর উত্তর কেন তাল ভালো নদী আর তো হালা টাম্বু আনি আরে কিনে কিনে দেওয়া করে কিনে এতদিন বাদে ভাঙি আর টাম্বু দিয়ে দে এতদিন বলে টাম্বু টাম্বুকে শুনেও দে